hello, and welcome to another episode of Good Vet Life. I am beyond excited about my guest today. She has some amazing information to share with us that I wished I had known when I was a teenager. Really?
Yes.
And it's her name is Carol Kramer, and she has Kramer Acupuncture Clinic here in Brighton, Michigan, where she recently moved from Toledo, Ohio, here.
Yes.
And I will say she's award-winning and won the Best Acupuncturist in Toledo in 2022. So welcome, Carol, and tell us about, well, today we're going to focus on menopause, right?
Yes.
And I love
yes.
your title is Menopause is Not a Disease, right?
Exactly.
It's so start there. Let's start there.
Yeah. So, menopause is just a natural life transition. It's an important life transition. It's big, but it's a transition. It's a transition, from a previous way of being into a new way of being. I think it's as big of a transition as puberty is. So if you think about your body and your thoughts and your thought patterns before puberty, and then what happens during that transition after puberty, how much you change, everything changes. And with menopause, it's the same thing. And we can capture beauty in that transition and change, just like we did, transitioning into puberty.
Wow, I'm getting those little body chills, right? About the idea that because it's just a natural part of life, that we should embrace it as such.
Yes.
But we don't, because we don't know about it.
Right.
We don't understand it.
Right.
And our society doesn't have that value on it.
Right.
On aging.
Right.
Aging gracefully, and the value that older people, and we were talking like it can start at 35.
Oh, absolutely. The age range of that transition, the body starts to change at 35.
So talk a little bit about that. What does that look like?
Yeah. So from a traditional Chinese medicine perspective, and acupuncture is a part of traditional Chinese medicine. But from a traditional Chinese medicine standpoint, we look at menopause and those transition, we look at it as phases. So it's not just one thing. It's not just one set of symptoms. It really is, we look at it as a phase. So we've got those early phases, from 35 to maybe 45 or so for the average person. And then there's a middle phase where symptoms change. Things are changing. And then there's that sort of end phase, that later phase.
So is that like the peri, the menopause, and the post? Or
yes,
is that...
yeah. In broad terms, that's the way we look at it.
So what would, and I've heard that menopause is actually something that is, it's a moment. It's not a 10-year thing. Menopause itself is a moment.
Right.
So what does that mean?
Yeah. So menopause actually is that moment. It's 1 year after your last period. That's when menopause happens. In our society, we use the catchphrase, or we use the overall term menopause to describe the entire process. So when I'm talking about menopause, I really am not talking about that one moment. I'm really referring to the entire transitional phase.
And so the phases, so if we're officially in menopause 1 year after our last period, right? So there's the phase leading up to that. Mm-hmm. There's, I don't know, the phase that we're in.
Yes.
During and then
after.
And then after. So what would be, and we were talking about earlier that everybody's different.
Everybody's different.
And that's another thing. I think in our society, we try to put everybody in boxes.
Exactly.
And do you think that's a Western medicine thing, or is that is just convenient?
I think it's
our society.
It's our society. I think it's our nature. I think it's human nature.
Okay.
I think it's human
to
nature.
Want to classify.
We want to classify because we want to understand. And that's the way that helps us understand.
Okay.
But when we're talking about the symptoms, that everybody's different. The big symptom that everybody knows about and talks about is hot flashes and night sweats. But that's a very, I don't want to minimize the how much that can impact your life, but that's just one part of it. So really menopause, that drop in hormones, affects every single cell in our bodies.
So talk more about that. What is that? What does that really mean?
Yeah. So, it affects our system of heating and cooling in the body. Of course, hot flashes, night sweats. It can cause insomnia. It can cause, your thirst can change during that time. You can become more thirsty. You can have digestive changes. You might feel like you're even more bloated. You might feel your PMS might be worse. You might, your bowel movements might change. You might have more constipation, loose stools. You might have, the texture of your skin changes. Your hair changes. Your eyesight can change. Your emotions change. So, everybody thinks, oh, the mood swings, the anger, the frustration. But I would also add to that grief. That grief of what was and what, the things that you want to hang on to and that need to be acknowledged and released and let go. So it affects every single organ system in the body.
I'm just kind of sitting here and I don't know why. All of a sudden I feel like those, when they talk about us dying, right? And all these things flash. And as you're talking, it's like, oh my gosh, it's just this flash of, that just huge sadness is my kids knowing that, my kids will never be children again. Right? Or they're, and not that you want them to stay children forever. Right. That would be horrible. Right. But it's just like, oh my gosh, there are dozens, probably hundreds of little tiny things that are going on that we just don't have, awareness of, access to.
Exactly.
Traditional Chinese medicine, so that's what you study to be an acupuncturist, is that correct? How does that work?
Yes. So to become a licensed acupuncturist and a board-certified Chinese herbalist, it's a 4-year master's degree. Okay. So it's quite a bit of training. We have training in Western medicine, so pathology, disease process, anatomy, physiology, pharmacology. We have training in that. And then we also have training in the Chinese medicine way of looking at the body and looking at things, because people come to us with their Western medicine diagnosis. We have to be able to translate that into our Chinese medicine paradigm.
And so what would that look like for menopause?
That's a great question. So for menopause, and really for any menstruation issues, for us, there's no separation between the menstruation, menstrual issues, and the rest of the body. So we're truly looking at the body holistically. Our principles are, Chinese medicine really is the science of movement, transformation, and communication. So every single one of our cells in our body is moving all the time.
Okay.
There's movement within our organs. There's movement between the organs. We're transforming the food that we take in, the air that we take in. We're transforming our emotions. So there's transformation is taking place all the time within all of these cells of our body. And our body, every single cell is communicating. So we're communicating all the time. So everything is connected. So those are the underlying principles. So what I'm looking for when somebody comes to me for, suffering from menopause symptoms, the first thing that I'm looking for is, where has that communication gone wrong? Where is there lack of movement in the body? Meaning, are the fluids, the body fluids, the blood, is it moving the way that it should? Is it moving to the places where it should be moving?
So can you give an example?
Yeah. So I like to use the analogy that the body is a garden. So instead of fixing the flower, which is the menopause symptom, let's say, I'm going to look at the environment in which that flower is growing. So I'm going to come in and imagine that the garden hasn't been tended to for years. You can imagine it's overgrown. There's weeds. There's, there might be water, and there might be an irrigation system, but there might be too much water in one place and not enough water in another place. There might be, it might be too dry in one place. It might be too warm in one area. The sun might be beating down a little bit too much. It might be too cold in another area. So I'm looking for those same things in the body. So I'm looking first to remove those obstructions. So as we're talking about the phases of menopause, the first phase happens around 35. So I'm looking to see how is the digestion working? Is there excess dampness in the body? So excess dampness in the body is reflected as fatigue, body aches. You kind of feel like your body is really heavy. It can be unintentional weight gain. It can be foggy thinking. Your mind just isn't as clear as it used to be. So those are all symptoms of dampness. And those can be some of the first symptoms of that menopause transition.
Well, and those are fairly common symptoms for lots of things, right?
Exactly.
So, I mean, I'm just thinking as if you can, I love your garden analogy. It makes it easy, but I can understand that, right? Because I'm just thinking of my own garden. It's like everything that you just talked about is there.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
I can see, how if you systematically kind of go through that, clean up the environment.
Right.
It changes everything.
Right. So, for example, if you can also imagine you're out in your garden and you have a garden hose and you're watering everything. When you're young, the garden hose might have kinks in it. There might be some mineral buildup inside. There might be some things obstructing it. But when that water is flowing really well, and when you have, it's strong, you don't notice that as much. It's like, I don't have to worry about the kinks in the hose. It doesn't affect me very much.
Right.
So that's what happens before menopause. And then what menopause happens is the water pressure starts to drop a little bit. And now the hormones are gradually reducing, but you're noticing it even more because there are obstructions there. So in essence, this is an analogy.
Right.
The hormones and the transformation, the communication isn't as good as it can be. So what I do as a Chinese medicine practitioner, I go in and fix those obstructions. So we do acupuncture, we prescribe Chinese herbal formulas to remove those obstructions first.
So somebody wants to come see you. What would an appointment look like?
Yeah. So what we'll do is we will take a complete medical intake. So we'll ask all of the normal Western medicine things that we would normally.
Okay.
But then we'll ask a series of questions to find out a series of if you have too much dampness in your body, if there's too much dryness somewhere, if there's too much heat somewhere in your body. There's not enough heat in other places. So we'll ask these seemingly very strange questions about what's going on, and then that will give us a map to help transform that.
Okay, and so then, so you've got traditional Chinese medicine with herbs and the herbal side of it, but then you've also got the acupuncture side. And I know there's lots of people that just freak out when they hear like, you're going to put needles in my... So talk about those two things and how what actually happens. It's not like you shove a needle in somebody's arm, but you kind of do, right? So
yes, they are needles,
right? But you're not shoving it in their arm, and they're tiny, and
they're tiny. For most people, when they hear needles, they have the image of a hypodermic needle, a shot, and my needles are hair thin. So most of them you don't feel. So I like to look at acupuncture works from the outside in.
Okay.
And Chinese herbal medicine works from the inside out.
Okay. So
we determine what's going on in the body, and we use the same guiding principles for acupuncture. So, we'll just take that dampness, that dampness analogy. So if somebody has excess dampness, I'm going to use protocols with acupuncture to help resolve and move that dampness along. And then I'm going to also use Chinese herbs that have that same that same function.
Okay, so
treat.
and we might have talked about dampness outside of the podcast.
Okay.
So just
Okay.
for remind,
Sure.
what would be those symptoms?
Yeah, so dampness are symptoms of fatigue.
Oh, right,
Dampness is
okay.
the heaviness in the body,
Okay.
the fogginess in the mind, those types of symptoms.
And if you're going to use acupuncture, where on the body would you use it?
So there are all different types and styles of acupuncture. I generally use points that are on the elbows and the legs and the ears and the scalp.
So when you're talking about small needles, can you tell us a little bit more? What are the needles actually doing?
That's a great question. The simple answer is that we're using the needles to communicate with the brain, and the brain then tells the body to decrease inflammation. We're also telling the brain to increase blood flow to the area.
Okay.
So the acupuncture is really doing those things. It's increasing blood flow, decreasing inflammation, helping the cells eliminate waste. So bringing it back to that movement.
Okay.
The movement, the transformation, and the communication. So we're using the needles to communicate with the brain to heal the body.
And I have had acupuncture in the past. They don't hurt. You don't feel them. There's that. It's a needle, but the truth is they really don't. You really don't feel them.
Exactly. That you really don't.
Right. But it sounds like they're very effective at making movement happen.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Good. Just so people are comfortable, right?
Yes.
Okay. It's so fascinating how the body's so interconnected.
It is.
Right?
It is.
It's just amazing. And then how do the herbs fit in? So is it like a tea? Do you take a tea? Is it a tincture? What does that look like?
There are many different ways to practice herbs.
Okay.
In my clinic, I use capsules.
Okay. So people just would swallow a capsule. Okay.
Right.
Let's talk about like menopause as a part of life, right? Because it is a part of life, just like being born is a part and dying. And our culture kind of like focuses on the younger years or the vibrant, and not on aging gracefully or some of those things. And what, from your perspective, does going through menopause change in us in the big picture, right?
Yeah. Once again, using that garden analogy, I think of it as, if you have your summer garden, you have all the flowers that you love in your summer garden. And we know that in the fall, things transition and change. Different types of flowers bloom in that garden. Different plants come to life. And I look at the transition, I think oftentimes we try to force those summer plants to grow in our fall garden. And we can do it, but it takes extraordinary effort. It takes extraordinary amounts of energy to tend to keep those summer flowers blooming. We'll probably have to build a greenhouse. We're going to have to get electricity to it. We're going to have to tend to it. And once you take all of that away, then we still have to transition into the fall.
That's a powerful analogy, right? It's so easy to see and understand. Excuse me. And I was having this conversation with somebody earlier this week. It's being in Michigan, the seasons are so prominent, right? You have winter is very definitely winter,
right,
and summer is very definitely summer. And that's kind of a magic of living in an environment with 4 seasons.
Right.
Where I grew up in Oregon, and it was, we like to say it was rainy or it wasn't, right? And it has its own beauty and magic at the same, but it's not as distinct. And there's what I've come to appreciate is there's such beauty, real deep beauty in each of the seasons. So while winter can look cold and bleak, it's actually can be very restorative, right? It's the time to do things that, I don't know, read, knit, go outside and enjoy, be in the cold.
Yeah.
And so I love that your analogy, because it is, yes.
There's so many wonderful things that happen after menopause.
Right. Well, you have time to do things differently. I've found I think differently. Right. I appreciate so much, so many things differently. And your analogy of keeping summer flowers, in seasons past their season, to be, and I'm not. This is not a judgment. It's just a discernment. For some people, depending upon who they are, it's important and it's great.
Absolutely.
And for others, it's like, okay, it's fall.
Yeah.
Fall's magical.
Yeah.
Right. And like I said, winter
Right.
is too. If you go into it with the mindset of the magic that the season provides.
Right.
Because nature is not. Nature is very intentional.
Right.
And our bodies, our bodies are going to age regardless. Right. I think that's one of the magic things about, life in its way. It's like you can't stop it. Right? You can't stop a baby from starting to walk.
Yeah, right. I think that's why, through that menopause phase, I think it's so important to allow grieving. In our society, we don't really recognize and we don't mark necessarily those passages.
Right. We don't.
And to move through a passage, it has to be honored and recognized and allowed a proper goodbye. And we don't do that.
That is so fascinating. Anna Olginski is doing a grieving workshop and she wrote this beautiful book about grief. And there was something. I read the book, but there was something in me that was saying grief is bigger than just somebody dying.
Yes.
Or a huge life thing that you can see, a divorce or a death. Those are big. They're tangible, right? But going through menopause, your body changing, it's more subtle.
Yeah, it is.
And
it's surprising. I think when I went through, I was, the emotions that I felt were surprise and shock and really? Nobody told me this was going to happen. And then the grief,
Right.
Yeah.
But it's not grief that you can put your finger on. You can't, it's like I just feel sad, or I feel disconnected or lonely in a way, and there's no reason why. Right?
Yeah,
if I look at my life, everything's fine.
Yeah.
Why am I feeling this way?
Yeah.
And what's wrong with me?
Yeah. But I think it's that natural, I think it's our spirit, our psyche, longing for that recognition of it, just to be honored and recognized.
Well, and I love what you said earlier about, we're not, when we understand what's happening, you realize you're not alone.
Right.
Everybody it's like dying. Nobody gets out of it.
Right. And it affects everyone. I mean, of course, obviously it affects women, but it affects everybody in their life as well, because it's such a huge transition. And, it affects your spouse, it affects your kids, it affects your coworkers.
Right.
So it's such a big life event. And at the same time, it's not acknowledged.
And it can be magic.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I'm a grandma now, and my oldest grandchild just turned 10 this 2 days ago. And I was reflecting, we all kind of feel like we're still 20, right? And you look in the mirror and you go, oh, I'm not. And so there's that part of us. But then there's the other part. I was fortunate to have amazing grandparents. And now I'm in that interesting, I guess. Some of it I don't even have words, because it's interesting now how the magic of being a grandma, right? Yeah. And how I get to show up. But there's also that part of it is the idea is stepping into it, maybe acknowledging it, like this is, I'm past menopause, and I get to be a grandma, which is magical. Yeah. Right? Mm-hmm. And so, I can't wear clothes like we were passing around the clothes, some pictures of us as teenagers. It's like, that's not happening. And it's okay, because who wants to be a teenager again anyway? Right? But I love it's just, you've just given me so much to think about, especially like with Good Vet Life and with our connecting people. People who do what you do with people that are going through menopause and don't have words around what's happening, right, and how to embrace it in a way that's truly a magical part of life.
It is. And also I would say it doesn't have to be, you don't have to suffer with the symptoms. That's
so
you
talk
just
more
don't
about
have,
that.
You just don't have to. With Chinese medicine, we're able to really work magic to help eliminate those most common symptoms. And so I guess want people to know that they don't have to suffer with it. And there are options other than the pharmaceutical route that you can take.
Okay, so I want to just do a quick shout out to one of our sponsors, who is Snedecor's Cleaners. We are in the middle of a remodel, and I have no washer and dryer in my house. And one of the things that Snedecor's does is everything is pick up and delivery. So I have this lovely yellow bag. I put it on my doorstep. They pick it up, and the clean laundry or dry cleaning comes back. And so it was so comforting to know that I didn't have to worry about how I was going to get my laundry done for the week or so that my washer and dryer are out of commission. And I was talking to a friend yesterday who was saying, they had a dryer that wasn't working. And so they had to get a new one, and there was some changes up to code. So their option was going to the laundromat, which was a whole nother experience. But I was able to say, hey, check out Snedecor's. They can pick your laundry up and bring it back to you, and it's no hassle at all. So it's another great service and a comfort. And as we think of our self-care is knowing that our laundry is going to be clean. So thank you to Snedecor's Cleaners. And now back to our guest with Carol Kramer from Kramer Acupuncture. Where would you say somebody would start? It's like somebody listening, because I recognize some of what they're talking about, and how do I learn more or know more?
The best time to start for the transition is when you're in your 30s.
Why does everything come back to that?
Everything
right?
Starts with that.
It's like,
right. So if you're having PMS, if you're having period pain, if your cycles are not pleasant, see a Chinese medicine practitioner, see an acupuncturist, and start there. Start with diet, start with exercise, all of those things we know. So that's a good place to start.
Okay.
If you're already experiencing the symptoms, make an appointment with your acupuncturist, with your Chinese herbal medicine provider. Just do that exploratory meeting and see what they have to say and what the treatment plan would be, and if that's something that you can fit into your life.
And and I'm sorry, as you're talking, my brain is going to. I had a partial hysterectomy at 38 because I bled so much, and that couldn't be stopped. And I was anemic. I was anemic my entire 20s and 30s because I couldn't take iron.
Oh.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, and as you are, I'm sure you're aware, there's a lot that goes on behind that, right? I felt catatonic half my life.
Oh, yeah.
Because of the iron issue.
Yeah.
But I didn't. I come from a medical family, but I didn't know anything that there could be other options other than going through the route that I did. And so that's just fascinating, right? It's fascinating.
Yeah.
And so okay, so that's a great place to start. If somebody wanted to find a traditional Chinese medicine, where would they go to look for that?
So I would look online, and you can look up a licensed acupuncturist. You want to make sure they're licensed by the NCCAOM, the National Certification Commission for Acupuncture and Oriental Medicine, NCCAOM.
It's a mouthful. Okay.
You can actually even go to their website to find someone in your area. Just find a licensed provider.
And you're here in Brighton.
I'm here in Brighton.
Right now instead of Toledo, which we're so happy to have you.
Oh, thank you. I'm happy to be here.
So, okay. Well, great. It's my head is spinning. Literally, you have brought up so many things and it's all good. And I recently, and maybe you've heard this, was listening to a thing about whales. And I don't know if it's a certain species of the whale but there's some whales. Most whales die after they have babies, right? But there's a certain whale that will live on like after menopause. And they said, and those whales that have gone through whale menopause, have become like the matriarchs of the family because they're wise. And they bring so much to the pods, and it's just fascinating how, if you look around, the older women in the communities add so much wisdom and underlying support.
Yeah, absolutely. I really feel that. That was an interesting change for me too, because when you're younger, I think we unconsciously search for those wise women. We look for them to help guide us just with decisions. And then, after the menopause transition, it was like, oh, there aren't quite as many of them around as there is.
No.
Some of my go-to women are
gone.
Yeah, are gone, are sadly gone.
Well, and then there's the other thing that I see is that now the women that would be the go-to women don't want the role. It's and it's not because they don't know how to be in that role, right? Yeah. It's like, I want to be younger again and have these wise women. It's like being the princess versus the queen, right?
That's a great analogy.
I just want to be a princess.
Well, that's the summer flower, right?
Right.
You want to stay the
summer flower.
Summer flower.
Right. Because she's just so much more, I don't know, vibrant and beautiful than the winter flower in a different way.
In a different way.
Yeah.
In a different way.
So I need to just shout out Good Fat Life for those of you who aren't familiar with it. You can go to goodfatlife.com. We have a magazine, and we're right in the middle of getting ready to go to print for our July, August, and September issue, which is always just so much fun. And then we have a workshop in September 14th coming up, a women's wellness workshop. We call it More Wonder, Please, because who doesn't need a lot of wonder in their life, right?
I love it. Yes.
Right? And anyway, so check us out, and thank you again to Carol Kramer from Kramer Acupuncture in Brighton, Michigan, for being here. And again, there are so many more things that Carol does. And if you, just a little thing, acupuncture can have a huge impact on infertility, right? That, when I heard that was shocking to me and also very encouraging. And there's so much more that Carol has to tell us about. And so I can see some future episodes in our future.
I would love that.
So anyway, so thank you, and go out and live your good fat life.